A federal judge on Wednesday ordered Texas to remove a large floating barrier in the middle of the Rio Grande after protests from the U.S. and Mexican governments over Republican Governor Greg Abbott's latest scheme to stop migrants from crossing America's southern border. The decision by U.S. District Judge David Ezra of Texas is likely to be appealed by the state, which for the past 2 years has aggressively pushed legal boundaries to curb the flow of migrants under a sprawling mission known as Operation Lone Star. The judge said the state must remove the barrier by September 15th. We talked to immigration lawyer Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, owner of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law.
Well, he's going to appeal the injunction, he says, but he will continue to lose. I mean, it's incredibly clear that the jurisdiction does not lie within the state government to decide whether to put buoys in an international waterway. There just is no good legal argument on his side. So what happened in the federal court was that the judge issued an injunction, which basically means a pause, right? An injunction on the buoys, and that they ordered that they be removed by September 15th. So it's possible that Abbott will appeal. He says that he will. I think that it's extremely unlikely that any appellate court would reverse the injunction and allow the buoys to stay.
So we'll be back at this again. So, and the buoys stay in place.
No, I think not. I think so. The federal judge has said take out the buoys by September 15th. Abbott says I'm going to appeal, but in order for when he appeals an injunction, an appellate court would have to say you don't have to remove the buoys. And I don't think that, in my opinion, I don't think that Abbott has enough legal standing to be successful on appeal. But I think that the reality of the situation is that the longer this, is tied up in court and talked about, the outcome that Abbott wants exists. He's getting lots of attention and airtime and, support from his base because of this, even though really what's happening is he is engaging in illegal activities and continuing to waste Texas taxpayer money by fighting a losing battle in court. It's really very maddening when you understand sort of the legal angle of this.
Also, it seems like, I know the state attorney general always takes appeals to the same judge to get a judge in the Dallas area to rule in his favor, and he ruled on a lot of decisions in the governor and the attorney general's favor. You don't think this will still happen?
I mean, I think that we'll have to see, because there are a lot of federal judges who have been appointed who have strong political views. But what I, in my opinion, sort of reading through the legal arguments that Abbott has tried to make, is that he has a very flimsy argument. There is a very clear federal statute that says that the federal government makes the ultimate decision on the placement of any type of device in a waterway. And there just is no argument that Abbott can make that would give him the jurisdiction here. And it's, him against the federal government. The federal government clearly has the power. The only, I think, argument that perhaps let's say a conservative appellate judge might run with is the argument that Abbott has power because he is under invasion, because the state of Texas is under invasion. So perhaps that could be one, but I just don't. I mean, we'll have to see. We'll know in a week. I think that what's going to happen is if he appeals, the injunction will not be lifted, and he will ultimately have to remove these buoys.
You spent millions of dollars of taxpayer money already down there.
Billions. On Operation Lone Star, the state of Texas has spent $10 billion. And to put that in context, the overall educational budget for the state is $60 billion. And all of these efforts have accounted for less than 1% of the border apprehensions. So it's incredibly expensive, also not effective at all. But, again, everybody's talking about Abbott and what he's doing at the border, and we've got an election coming up next year, and I think ultimately there's one person who really does benefit from all of this, and it is Greg Abbott.
You know, it brings up another issue. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but it brings up the Attorney General, who has a play with this also, with a lot of the court proceedings and his legal standing.
Yes, I mean, it is a time in Texas. This is the Wild West right now. There's a lot going on with our state politicians, and I personally am just buckling up because it's going to be a very bumpy year ahead for Texans and, ultimately the rest of the nation.
He's saying the governor talks about invasion, and he's talked about that on numerous occasions, and he's brought that up. And now other governors in other states are saying the same thing. When they talk about Texas, they talk about Arizona, they talk about the invasion and building the wall again. But you're saying that this is just kind of a ploy because that's not what's happening at the border?
Look, I mean, that plays really, really well with the base. Fear is an incredible motivator. And the bottom line is there's a tribalism to humans at play. And you see this in our immigration debate historically in this country. I mean, there were times in our history, in our not too long history, that we were saying similar things about Jewish people, Italian people, Chinese people, Irish Catholics, Germans, people who were considered different and outsiders. And, this is just a period of what's called restrictionism or extreme anti-immigrant sentiment in the country. And when that is going on, the politicians know exactly what buttons to push. And if they equate immigration with danger, trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, invasion, etc., it really gets people afraid, and it gets them voting, it gets them donating, it gets them supporting candidates. And I think really these candidates they know that this isn't the danger. This is not a danger. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, I think politicians are doing what they need to do to get funding and elected.
What happens to this buoy with the razor wire? Will it be taken off the water altogether, or will it just be put on the banks?
That's a good question. I don't know what they would do with the buoys once they remove them. I don't know, maybe leave them nearby so that if they're successful ultimately in the case, because an injunction is it's a mechanism to stop an action that is harmful while a legal proceeding plays out. So we don't have a final decision from the judge on the buoys, but in the meantime, the buoys have to be removed. But it could be that Abbott says, okay, well, I'm going to take the buoys out under the injunction, but leave them nearby so that if I'm ultimately successful in the court case, I can reinstall them quickly and easily.
You will, I know that how many people were actually hurt by this buoy? I've heard high numbers of people that have been affected. Children have been affected, and women and children have been affected by this razor wire.
Yeah, well, and of course, there's no clear data. No one's out there, giving us accurate reports on this. But there were the whistleblowers who were in the Texas Guard who said that they recounted stories of, pregnant women and children being injured and caught up in the wires. There were a few media reports of a young person, maybe a child, who drowned in the buoys, and I've heard of a couple of others. So there's, anecdotal reports of people who have died because of them. But I don't think anybody really knows the real number.
We know that he's also come to say that migrants that's coming across the border equals drug dealers, that equals fentanyl, that equals deaths to American citizens. That's the politics that's being played. That's the story that's being played out across the state right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk about drug usage and fentanyl usage. Has any of that money flowed back into the state as far as dealing with drug abuse or that kind of intervention type of policies at all that you know of?
I don't know about the federal funds available to combat the drug epidemic and fentanyl. But what I can say is that you're absolutely right, that the way that this is spoken about by conservative politicians is that all of these migrants who are at the border are the very same people who are trafficking drugs into the United States. And what I can say, I'm an immigration lawyer in Texas. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've worked with thousands of migrants. That the people who are, with their children, they're living in tents, they're desperate refugees along the southern border. They're homeless refugees. They are not the all-powerful cartels and drug traffickers. They are the victims of those people. What you might imagine that an international drug trafficking cartel has funding, has resources. They are comfortable. They like what they're doing. They like where they're living. They're not living in tents along the Rio Grande River. So if you just think about it like a reasonable, rational person, you would understand that, of course, drug traffickers are not desperate migrants. It's not one and the same. In fact, I would argue that the migrants and, us here in the United States, we're all the victims of the drug cartels. And we're actually on the same team. So, that's been my experience talking to all of these people.
That was immigration lawyer Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, owner of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law.